What if this darkness in our world is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? What if a new world is waiting to be born? Dear sisters and brothers, tonight we receive this wisdom, these teachings from our sixth sister, Valerie Kaur, and we listen and take in her powerful words in the midst of this extraordinary gathering of humanity, and also in the midst of an extraordinarily complicated and dangerous time in world history as cycles of violence and poverty deepen, despotic regimes strengthen, and the earth cries out in agony. Valerie invites us not into the paralysis of the pit of despair, but into a fierce and bloody labor of birthing a new world, a world in which revolutionary love is our central ethic. Like prophets before her, Valerie stands in the midst of the pain of the world, eyes and heart wide open, taking in that pain, the pain of others, the pain of her community, the pain of her country, the pain of the planet, pain she feels in her body and soul, and with the words of her mother whispering in her ear, you are brave, giving her courage. She breathes and pushes through the pain, bringing to new life a new hope, birthing a new movement for us, a movement which expresses itself through love in action, revolutionary love, the choice to enter into labor for others, for our opponents, and ourselves. It is breathtaking. And in our humanness and our breathlessness, our minds and bodies push back in the face of the challenges before us. In the face of Valerie's call to action, there are perhaps voices arising in us that shout, but what about the pain and the suffering and the violence? How is this possible to counter all this violence, to talk about love, to birth new consciousness? It can't be done. It's too hard, too much to bear. I can't breathe. I find it hard to breathe. And then, like her mother before her, Valerie whispers in our ears, breathe, dear friends, you are enough. You are brave. You can do this. You can push through the fear, the isolation, the pain. Do not resist the forces of labor. Feel the forces of love around you and within you. And then, say it with me, breathe and push. Breathe and push. This is what we're called to do in the midst of this time of great transition, not just resist the forces of the shadows, but rebirth the reality that revolutionary love reestablishes us as one family, one human family. Valerie is so right. The sacred writings of all traditions, the teachings of poets and prophets all speak to this. God created humanity in God's image. From one ancestor, God made all the nations to inhabit the whole earth. All of us are sheltered beneath the overshadowing dome of heavens, each part of the whole hoop of the world, where all live together like one being. These are visions of revolutionary love. A revolutionary love which expresses itself in radical inclusion, the embracing of the diversity of all humanity, of all living things as essential, sacred, and interdependent. This is the power of love and the promise of inclusion that gathers us here this week. As a child, I grew up as one among many. It was not unusual for me when at my grandparents' dinner table to be surrounded by people of a wide variety of beliefs. Their friends typically included Christians and Jews, Muslims and Hindus, Buddhists and humanists, indigenous peoples from around the world. This was my world. This was my normal. I was one among many. I learned that my Christian path was one among many, and that being one among many was a beautiful thing, one of the many diverse beings that God or the Great Spirit or the life force created, different nations and tribes. We were created united in mind and heart. We were created bound together in our common humanity to each other, to all living beings, and to our Mother Earth. But as I grew up, I began to realize that many other people did not share my one among many experience, at least not in a positive way. They did not see themselves as part of the nations and tribes all created, did not feel that connection or commitment to the well-being of all humanity. Instead, I heard people talk about those different from themselves as other, as foreign, as unbelievers, as a threat, as the enemy. And I heard people making claims of exclusive ownership of the truth, claims that diminished and delegitimized the experience and beliefs of others. This made me sad as a child. It makes me sad now. There is no place for exclusivism in religion or in politics or in our world. It has arguably been the single greatest source of suffering throughout history. Religious exclusivism, the belief that my truth is the only truth, violates the core spiritual tenets of all beliefs. The claim of exclusive knowledge of the truth is, in a religious sense, idolatry, in a political sense, extremism, and in a psychological sense, narcissism. In all these cases, exclusivism leads to the dehumanization and exclusion, not to love and inclusion. Valerie has offered us practices for embodying revolutionary love, to love others by seeing no stranger, to love our opponents by tending the wounds, to love ourselves by breathing and pushing. The practice of radical inclusion requires the practice of radical humility. Understanding each of our own perspectives as formed by our unique experience of the world, we need to hear and understand the experience of others in order to gain a more complete understanding of this world. Human diversity can be such a beautiful thing, but when viewed through an isolated, exclusivist, or fear-based lens, this can feed the poisons of racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and all other fear-based diseases that infect our society. We see this all around us. Purveyors of fear, spreading the nonsense of a clash of civilizations or the heresy of the superiority of one race, gender, or religion over another. Words that have consequences in violent action, including around the world. Just this past week, the killings at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, near a church in Kentucky, at a mosque in Somalia, at a shrine in Iraq, in villages in Nigeria, and so many other places. Acts of violence born of prejudice, the direct result of dehumanizing rhetoric and the division that it creates. We weep, we grieve for the loss of life and suffering, and then we go back to work, meeting that hate, that violence with revolutionary love and with radical inclusion. In my work in the United Religions Initiative, I see people of all beliefs refusing to be divided, reaching across lines of difference, engaging in dialogue, learning from one another, celebrating diversity, and working side by side to engage the challenges faced by their communities and the world, practicing revolutionary love and radical inclusion. I hear and witness every day good news stories about millions of people like you who are spread out across the world, dedicated to promoting daily interfaith cooperation, ending religiously motivated violence, and creating cultures of peace, justice, and healing for the earth and all living beings. In answering Valerie's call, we must become midwives of a new consciousness, a new world, inspired by the ethic of revolutionary love, practicing radical inclusion, rooted in radical humility, informed by the teachings of our sacred traditions, and also informed by the wisdom of new voices, young voices like Rachel's, allowing young people to be our teachers. We must welcome young people as our leaders, not for the future, but right now. In doing so, in doing this, we become midwives of the movement, bringing our skills to the process of helping others birth the life and love that is within them, rebirthing the sacredness and interwovenness of all life. Dear friends, we have a magnificent and formidable journey ahead of us. Valerie has challenged us to rebirth our lives and our world, and through the practice of revolutionary love. Inspired by her vision, I challenge you to rebirth our religious and spiritual movements in ways that reject exclusivism and embrace the unique beauty and truth that lies at the heart of all traditions. In this way, we learn to live our lives as one among many, freeing our own traditions from the idolatrous bonds of exclusivism which have held them captive for too long. And freeing our world from the abuses of power and privilege under which so many have suffered and continue to suffer, thereby replacing the fear-based practices of patriarchy with revolutionary love and radical inclusion. As I look out at you, I am aware that I am one among many, and that being one among many is a beautiful thing. As I hear you speak, as I look into your eyes, I see no stranger, but rather I see God in you. I feel God's presence in you, not just a partial reflection of my Christian God, but a wholeness that lies beyond my experience and connects us one to the other. As I hear Valerie's call and am inspired by the work of all those people in the United Religions Initiative, in revolutionary love movements inspired by you, I know that my task, our task, on this planet at this time is to help our communities, our country, and this world to discover that we are one among many. But not just one among many, that out of many we can become one. Out of many we can become one. My deepest thanks for Valerie, for her leadership in this movement, and thanks to you for the courage of your commitment to bring peace each day into your lives and into this world. Peace, Shanti, Shalom, Salam, Sat Nam, Watai Kiwin. May peace be with you now and always.